Hey guys, so today we're going to try to put all the pieces together and hopefully complete this puzzle. What I'm going to do first though is explain the basics of all the pieces before I try to fit them together. So for some people this might be a rehash, but it's good to have a refresher. So first of all, I want to do a quick recap of the 276 sign. The 276 sign was a sign in the sun, moon, and stars that occurred at the end of last year on December 27th going into the 28th. Essentially, what it is a specific orientation of the sun, the moon, and the planet Jupiter that happens to match the information encoded within the book of Acts, chapters 27 and 28. Okay, so during that sign, those luminaries, quote unquote, in other words, the sun, moon, and the planet Jupiter, were positioned in the first, third, and ninth constellations of the Hebrew Mazzaroth. So you can see the Hebrew Mazzaroth here in this picture. The Mazzaroth is simply the 12 constellations that go around the ecliptic that tells the story of redemption. Okay, it starts on the first constellation of the Mazzaroth, which is Aries, the Lamb, and it goes around counterclockwise till you get to the last one, Pisces. Okay, so the positions of these luminaries. So the planet Jupiter was in the first constellation of Aries, and then the moon was in the constellation of Gemini, and then which is the third constellation, and then the sun was in the ninth constellation over here, which is Sagittarius. So as I said, this configuration is encoded within chapters 27 and 28 of the book of Acts, specifically in 3 verses. So if you look at chapter 27, verse 28, first you have, let's see, it mentions 20 fathoms and 15 fathoms. So if you add that together, you get 35. So that's the 35 degrees of ecliptic longitude of the position of Jupiter. Okay. So if you take a look at that sign, how it actually looks in stellarium, this is the ecliptic, like a top-down view. Okay, so it looks like a big circle, and then you can see the same constellations at the top here. You have Aries, the Lamb, going around counterclockwise. You can get to Gemini, keep going, and you get to Sagittarius over here. So this is the a snapshot of in time of what of when that sign actually manifested on December 27th, going into the 28th, sort of in the middle of the night. So you can see Jupiter here was in the Lamb at 35 degrees. So that's the first clue there from Acts 27, verse 28. Now then if you look at Acts 27:37, that's where it mentions the 276 number. Okay, so it says there were 276 souls in the ship. Now the 276 here manifests as the position of the sun on the ecliptic. Okay, now that's over here, down here on the bottom right part of the ecliptic in the constellation of Sagittarius, which is the ninth constellation. Now I have another view of that which shows it a little bit clearer and in a sort of rotated orientation at the same time, so right at that when that sign manifested. So in this proper orientation, we can more easily see that the upper part of the Sagittarius constellation looks like or resembles a ship. So if you look at these lines here, so like the bottom part here would be the hull, this would be the front mast, this would be the rear mast, and this would be the center mast. Let me just zoom in a little bit here. And when the sun is at 276 degrees, as it was during the sign, it is positioned exactly at the center mast. And I don't think that's any accident. I think that's supposed to be calling our attention to the shape here, which is, reflecting the content of the narrative in Acts 27, which is about, of course, Paul being on this ship voyage. Okay, so that's the, as I mentioned, that's from Acts 27:37, which mentions the 276 souls. So that's referring to 276 degrees of ecliptic longitude there. And then if you go to the next bit of information that is in Acts 28:11, it says that after 3 months of wintering in the island of Malta, where they crash landed, they departed in a ship of Alexandria, whose sign was Castor and Pollux. Okay, now here the word sign is a double entendre. By God, it's referring to an engraving or whatever on the ship, but it's also referring to the other use, the other sense or meaning of that word, which is a sign, like a celestial sign. So it's calling out a sign that would be appearing in the stars a couple thousand years later, in the constellation of Gemini, because Castor and Pollux are the two stars that are the main stars of that constellation. So looking at the sign configuration here again, so we have the moon up here in Gemini, or Castor and Pollux here, and this is the third constellation. So on these two dates of 20, so the moon happened to be entering into this Gemini constellation on the 27th of December, and then it was only there until the 28th. So after the 28th, it left. So for those two dates, only those 2 dates, the moon happened to be in the constellation of Castor and Pollux. And not only was the moon there, it happened to be the full moon exactly on those days. Okay, so when the sun reached 276 degrees, the moon was at 108 degrees of ecliptic longitude. So that's the official, let's say the official ecliptic longitude of the moon, of in this sign, in this the orientation of the luminaries. Okay, and that's very important because that plays into all the numbers and the math that come out of this orientation. So that's the sign, and it's pretty rare. I don't know. I don't think this has happened any time in the last 2,000 years. Now the sun is at 276 degrees every December. Okay, and at the end of December. But then, how often is it that the sun is at that specific longitude, and the moon is in Gemini? Okay, well that happens about every 20 years. Now, how often is it that the sun is in that specific location, and the moon just happens to be in Gemini on those 2 days, the 27th and the 28th? Now that's even rarer. Now, how often is it that happens to be a full moon? Well, that's even rarer. How often is it that when the sun is at 276 degrees, a full moon happens to be in Gemini on just those 2 days, and Jupiter is at 35 degrees of ecliptic longitude? Well, that's probably an order of magnitude even rarer. So I don't know. I haven't looked exactly if it's ever occurred in the last 2,000 years, but I would be very surprised if it did. Okay, so that is the sort of top-down view in Stellarium, which, if you don't know, is an astronomy program on the PC. Okay, so this is a little thing that I drew. This concerns the actual specific orientations, okay, because there are more luminaries involved. So Mercury and Mars were in conjunction at that moment. Saturn was a specific location as well, and there's a lot of math that comes out of this, which I won't get into here because I want this to be really brief. Now, I actually drew this, and I'll show this to you. These are the dimensions of the 276 sign. Just the basic participants of the Sun, Moon, and Jupiter. And these numbers are important because they pop up in the information that you can sort of decode out of this sign. Okay, so as I mentioned, the Sun is at 276 degrees, the Moon is at 108 degrees, and then Jupiter is at 35 degrees. Okay, between the Sun and the Moon, right? Because there's 360 degrees in a circle. Is 192 degrees on this side of the ecliptic, but if you can take the other way around, and it's 168 degrees, right? Because 192 plus 168 equals 360. Okay, so you take the short way, it's 168 degrees. Take the long way, it's 192 degrees. And then the position of Jupiter. So the Sun is 119 degrees away from the position of Jupiter, which is a supremely important number to the book of Acts. It's just all connected. I don't want to get into it too much. I mean, the 276th verse of the Bible is Genesis 11:9, if I recall correctly, just for example. Okay, and then of course, taking the other way around the ecliptic, instead of the fast way of 119 degrees, it's exactly 241 degrees, which is the gematria value in Hebrew of Zerubbabel. And remember, Zerubbabel is when he's taken by God in the book of Haggai, chapter 2. That is a typological reference to the rapture. Let's see what else. Oh, okay. And then from the 276 degrees to the, I guess due north is what you would call it, to the 0 degree point here, that's exactly 84 degrees. And 84 is obviously a well-known number because that's Enoch, for instance, the first man who was raptured. That's his Hebrew gematria value. Just a whole bunch of other stuff. So, and then there's some other numbers that come out of this. So like if you add 276, the position of the sun, to the 108 degree position of the moon, you get 384. So 384 pops up a lot in the numeric study, in the study of the numerics of the sign. And then if you add the 276 to the 192, you get 468, which is another number that pops up a lot. So like I said, I don't want to get too deep into this. I mean, I've covered a lot of this in past videos, but I just want to show you that this is a very interesting sign. There's a lot of information that's packed into it, a lot of information that's encoded. So, all right, let me move on from this. Let me just quickly show this again. This is a more of an artistic depiction of the sign. So once again, you got so what the sign is really signaling here is because Jupiter is in the constellation of the Lamb, okay, and then the sun and the moon are in the 3rd and 9th constellations. It's sort of a depiction, or it's symbolizing the cross, okay, because you've got the Lamb on the cross from the 3rd hour to the 9th hour, okay. So the Jupiter is in the Lamb constellation, and then you've got the sun and the moon in the 3rd and 9th constellations. So that's really what it's sort of signaling. What the sign is also signaling are, number one, the end of the church age, okay? Not that it ended at that moment, obviously we still want to be spreading the gospel and getting, bringing in more souls, but it's like the impending end of the church age. It's like the imminent end, okay? And number two, the announcement of the dedication of the living temple of God, which began 2 weeks after this sign on Kislev 24 on the Enochian calendar, which I'll get to, okay? So that was actually January 11th on the Gregorian calendar. That marked the beginning of of our dedication, right, as the living temple of God. We're living stones in the temple of God, okay? And then, thirdly, it also it marked the beginning of a defined tarrying period, okay, at the end of which the rapture will occur, followed by the start of the tribulation. And for a number of reasons, I believe that was the point at which, like, the tarrying began, because it mentions clearly in Scripture that Jesus will be tarrying. Okay, there's going to be a point where he's expected and he doesn't come because he's tarrying. I believe that this is the point where that tarrying began. So, as I mentioned before, this is like the point in time where the ship dropped the anchor, right? So it dropped the anchor here at the end of 2023, because a lot of the prophecy stuff is pointing to 2023 as the time of Jesus' arrival, and it didn't happen. A lot of people got confused. But the thing is, when a ship drops an anchor, despite the fact that it dropped the anchor in 2023, it can still float forward to some extent, but it can only float forward so far before it will also stop floating forward. So at some point, I think in 2024, that's when the rapture happens. But the anchor was dropped at the end of 2023, fulfilling all of the prophetic math, if you will, that seemed to point to 2023. Now, the difference between the 276 sign and other signs out there, like the Revelation 12 sign, for the most part, is the complexity of the sign, and therefore the amount of encoded information built into it. So the 276 sign is packed with it seems like an almost endless amount of secrets, many of which I've explained in detail on this channel over the last few months. But a new one that I found a few days ago is this. Acts chapters 27 and 28, the chapters where the sign is defined, are the 116th and 117th chapters of the New Testament. Okay, and respectively they contain 44 and 31 verses. Now if you take that as a number, 44, 31, okay, and then write it backwards, 1, 3, 4, 4, and then subtract the number of the numbers of the chapter of the New Testament. So Acts 27 is the 116th, and Acts 28 is the 117th. So if we do minus 117, okay, and then minus 116 for the 116th chapter, it gives you the dates that the sign manifested. Okay, so that's 12/27, December 27th, and that's December 28th, 12/27, 12/28. Another one is if you multiply the month by the year, so it happened in December 23, so that's 12/23, 12 times 23 equals 276 for the 276 sign. This one I've mentioned before in the past, but it's so fun, I thought I'd mention it again. So the date is 12/27/23, okay? And if you do 1 times 2, so we're just taking the product of the digits in this date, okay? So 1 times 2 times 2 times 7 times 2 times 3, times 3, you get 168 degrees, which is in the sign as I showed. Let me just pull that up again real fast. 168 degrees here between the position of the sun and the moon, right? The sun 276 degrees and the moon 108 degrees. Okay, now and then if you take the next day, because remember the sign materialized or manifested rather from the 27th going into the 28th, so 12/28 of 23, and then you do a product of the digits of that date. 1 times 2 times 2 times 8 times 2 times 3, you get 192 degrees, which is the difference between the position of the sun and the moon on the other side of the ecliptic. So you see the 192 right there. Now, if you take the if you add the 20 to, or rather the 20 to that 23, because in other words, instead of 12/28/23, you do 20/23, and you take the product of that. So let's do 1 times 2 times 2 times 8 times 2 times 2 times 3. You don't want to add the 0 in there because it'll just always result in 0. You get 384 degrees. Now what's that? So like I mentioned, 276 degrees plus 108 degrees is 384 degrees. And remember, 276 degrees is the position of the sun. 108 degrees was the position of the moon in the sign. Okay, so it's 276 over here and 108 degrees over here in Gemini. So these are only a few of the, I don't know, 100 or so amazing numerical clues built into that sign that I've found. There are probably a lot more that I haven't found. Even the year when the sign manifested is encoded within the numbers, and even on all calendars, Gregorian 2023, the rabbinical calendar 5784, and the Anno Fall, which is the year of the fall, which is 5994. Okay, so for instance, if you take 223, okay, which is just a numeric signature of 2023, and then you add 784, which is a sort of shorthand way of the current rabbinical year, and also the year that the sign manifested, and you add those together, you get 1007. Okay, and 1007 is the number of verses in the book of Acts. Okay, now if you take that 1007 and you divide it by 168, whoops, which is remember that's the degrees of separation between the sun and the moon positions in that sign. Let's take a look here. Let's do that. 1007 divided by 168. You get 5.994, which is the year that the sign manifested. Anno Fall, year of the fall. Okay, and that's actually still the current year. Or you can take 1007 and subtract it from its reverse, and you also get 5994. Or you can take the 276 sign's calendar date of 1227, subtract from it its reverse, 7221, and you get 5994. So there are a lot of these little fun clues, and this is certainly not exhaustive. Like I said, I've found probably 100 or more of these things that sort of are self-confirming for this sign. But these are just some of the funner ones. Now, let's switch up now to look to see how this number 276 shows up in sort of current events time frame. Now, first of all, when the sign occurred, it was 276 months from the start of the 21st century, almost exactly. So on New Year's, remember the sign occurred like 3 days before New Year's. So on New Year's Day, it was exactly 276 months from the start of the 21st century. So that's a pretty amazing non-coincidence. Okay, so next thing is from Israel's Independence Day in 1948, May 14, 1948, to its to last Hanukkah, December 7th, which is almost certainly its last normal, quote-unquote, Hanukkah, happened to be exactly 27,600 days. Okay, so you got your 276 there. All right, and then from Israel's birthday, again, 5/14/1948. Let me say it this way. On Israel's birthday this year, okay, so May 14th of this year, right, its 76th birthday, Israel was in existence exactly 27,760 days. Okay, so that's another 276. And then on May 30th of this month, Israel will be exactly in its 27,776th day of its existence. Okay? Which is obviously another 276. Okay? Stylized. Now, I suppose that something major might occur in Israel on that date. Okay? I mean, we'll see. I don't know. But it seems possible. So there's the number 276 very clearly being highly relevant to this current moment, okay, this current year that we're in. There are also other numbers that are closely linked to this sign, some of which I went over and already when we looked at the specifications. So obviously the ecliptic longitudes involved. All the ecliptic longitudes are very important in looking at are very important numbers that are projected by this sign that can be used to extract information, not just the 276 but the 108. The 192 or the 168, the 119, the 241 degrees, the 384, right? If you add the sun's position to the moon's position. But there is also the number 139 because the sign occurred in the 1st, 3rd, and 9th constellation. Okay. And additionally, 39 to a lesser extent is also important because it's just a shorter version of that. It's like if you leave out the position of Jupiter, the sign really has to do with the position of the sun and the moon, which is the 9th and the 3rd constellation, so 3rd to the 9th. And to also a certain extent, the number 329 is projected a lot in this sign. If you spend a lot of time studying the numerics, because it's kind of like 3, 2, 9, right? So 3rd hour to the 9th hour. But for the moment, let's take a look at the number 139. Okay. So again, that's because the sign occurred in the 1st, 3rd, and 9th constellations. So the first thing is that that last solar eclipse, the second Great American eclipse, happened to be in the Saros series 139. Now, Saros series is just this. It's how all solar eclipses are categorized. They're in a series which is designated by a number. If you watch Brother Jared over at Supernatural by Design, he talks about the Saros series a lot. Okay, so that second Great American eclipse just happened to be in Saros series 139. Okay, I don't know how many there are. There's probably like a few hundred. I don't know if it's 300 or 400 different numbers that it could possibly have been in. Going say from 1 to 400, I don't know. Somebody can look that up, but it just happened to be 139. The next thing is that per Wikipedia, on the October 7th Hamas attack on Israel, okay, which started the current conflict and the current war in Israel, the total casualties, okay, in that attack was 1,139. Okay, so the October 7th Hamas attack on Israel caused 1,139, which is a 1139, which is sort of an alternate representation of the 139, which is actually interesting as a little side note. If you take 139 plus 1139, 39 plus 1139, you get 1278, which is a compressed version of the date that it manifested. So if the date is like 1227 to 28, like that, in numerics you can compress like duplicated numbers, so you could take that out, and of course if you take out the hyphen, it would be 1278. So it's just an interesting little numeric phenomenon there with that number. Okay, so the next thing is that, so like I said, the 276 sign is encoded within Acts chapters 27 and 28, and on March 25th of this year, the United Nations Security Council adopted a Gaza ceasefire resolution, and the number was Security Council Resolution 2728, which was brought to my attention by Brother G44. Thank you, brother. So that's very interesting. They happen to be using that number. And I guess, yeah, a month prior to that, the Houthis in Yemen fired missiles on an oil tanker in the Red Sea, and it was kind of a big deal because it was like a British flagged oil tanker, And that oil tanker was called Pollux. So, you know, just like Castor and Pollux. And I thought that was kind of coincidental that this obscure name Pollux should be popping up in world news, especially at this time. So yeah, you see it was called MT Pollux. Let me zoom in here. MT Pollux, right? And as a quick side note, since we have the number 139 fresh in our minds, I'll quickly mention that I noticed recently that the first 139 Psalms contain exactly 2,324 verses, which shows you when the 276 sign will occur. In other words, at the transition from 2023 to 2024. So if you take the first 139 Psalms and you add up all the verses within those Psalms, you get exactly 2,324 verses. I thought that was pretty amazing. Okay, so now that I've gone over the 276 sign, let me quickly explain the big symmetrical diagram that Brother G44 and I have been developing over the last few months with the guidance of the Holy Spirit. So let me pull that up real fast. Okay, so this is the diagram, and my apologies to anybody looking on a cell phone screen or a small tablet, because it might be kind of hard to see the detail here. But this is the previous iteration of the diagram that I showed in the last video. And first of all, the diagram is based on the Enochian calendar, and that calendar was explained to us by our very smart brother over at the Tabernacle of the Bridegroom channel. And what it does is it sort of plots a series of key dates or events which all pivot around a central date, that central date being Kislev 24 on that Enochian calendar, okay, which corresponds to January 11th, 2024 on the Gregorian calendar. Now, that date was a really crazy celestial midpoint, as some of you are aware, because it's like the midpoint of a huge number of solar eclipses and blood moons. So for instance, looking at this chart, which was made available to us by Steve Fletcher, you can see, I don't think this is exhaustive. I think this is just as many as they could, as they look back. They look back to 1949 and then forward to 2098. But you can see all these blood moons are precisely, there's like a structure of symmetry where they have a midpoint of January 11th, 2024. So for instance, like the last blood moon, which was on November 8th, 2022, and the next one, which is in, I guess, March 14th, 2025, the exact center point between that time span is January 11th, 2024. And going to the previous, blood moon prior to that one in November 2022, and then the subsequent one after the other one also has a midpoint of January 11th, 2024, and so on and so forth, going back way back, at least 70 or 80 years. Probably goes back. I mean, I don't know if what they ended up determining or goes back to the beginning of time. And it's not just blood moons, it's also solar eclipses. This is another diagram from Steve Fletcher's channel. Same exact phenomenon. Same exact phenomenon. So you can see here the most recent one was the wedding ring eclipse on October 14th, and what is that? The second great American eclipse right here on April 8th. There's this center point of January 11th, 2024. Okay. Okay, so back then I was looking at, I had just discovered this 276 sign, and then that came up. And then I realized that according to that Enochian calendar, that date of, that celestial midpoint date of January 11th happened to be Kislev 24, the Kislev, the 24th day of the 9th month, which is described in the book of Haggai chapter 2. which is a huge day. It says on that date, I will shake the heavens and the earth. So then as other things were happening that we were discovering, I started to notice there's also, in addition to the celestial symmetry, there was like sort of a calendrical, numerical symmetry around that date. And so as we started to plot things that were happening, events and synchronicities or high watch dates, we noticed this calendrical, numerical symmetry happening. And so we started to plot them as leaves on this diagram. And the diagram, it started off pretty small. It was just like a few leaves, and it just kept getting bigger. And we started to notice we noticed a pattern of, for instance, this staggered intervals of 37 days here that you can see. And then, 37 is a God number that refers to the Trinity, or intervals of 74 days. And 74 is equal to Jesus in simple ordinal English gematria. And then we've got these 104-day spans, and that is 401 backwards, and 401 is the alpha and omega. So yeah, that's pretty much how this diagram got its start, and its development has been fueled by faithful watching over the course of a few months. And over that time, it's sort of gradually materializing and expanding. And as it does, more secrets get revealed. January 11th was also, as I think I mentioned it earlier in the video, was also marked the beginning of the dedication of the living temple, which was a dedication ceremony which lasted 14 or 15 days until January 27th, or until January 26th to 27th, I should say. And it followed the template of Solomon's dedication of the first temple. Now, if you want to understand why we believe that, you can take a look at, take a look at my channel. And go to videos, and a few months ago, there are some videos called Happy Hanukkah and Happy Sukkot. And in those two videos, we go into the details of why we think that our dedication as the living temple of God occurred at that time. Okay. So as you can see, the previous iteration of this diagram seemed to us to point to Enochian Passover, which is why we were watching that date, because there is this mirrored 114-day span. And, 114 telegraphs 114, aka Nisan 14. So we thought that this whole diagram was pointing to Passover. And not only is it mirrored, it was 114, ending at 114, right over here on the right-hand side. So we thought, okay, well, it looks like this diagram seems to be pointing to Passover, Enochian Passover. But then Passover passed. So obviously we looked at something after that. We looked at the possibility of the last day of Enochian Passover. So in other words, I guess it's the 7th day of unleavened bread. And this was based on a smart word study done by Brother G44 and King Solomon. So let me just show one of my community posts from back then. Let me just zoom in a little bit here. Okay, so what they noticed was that this solemn feast day or solemn assembly wording in the Bible is kind of like a keyword that refers to, according to the Torah, either one of two possible days, either the 7th day of Passover, or last day of Passover, in other words, the 7th day of unleavened bread, or the great 8th day, which is Shemini Atzeret. And so if you look at Psalms 81:3, it says, "Blow up the trumpet in the new moon in the time appointed on our solemn feast day." And this is also reflected in Joel 2:15. It says, "Blow the trumpet in Zion, sanctify a fast, and call a solemn assembly." So this, like I said, it could be one of those 2 days, and we thought that it could refer to Passover. So it could be like kind of a hint from God that the rapture would be occurring on at the end of Passover. So for reference, this is actually found in Deuteronomy 16:8. 6 days thou shalt eat unleavened bread, and on the seventh day thou shalt be on the seventh day shall be a solemn assembly to the Lord thy God. Thou shalt do no work therein. Okay, so that's referring to the last day of Passover, the seventh day of unleavened bread. And isn't that interesting also that it's Deuteronomy 16:8, which is 168, which means that the 276 sign, the 168 degrees in that sign could be referencing this verse. Who knows? So yeah, so the conclusion was that solemn feast day and solemn assembly are all that all equal, are all pointing to the seventh day of unleavened bread. So that's the last day of Passover, and what bolstered that theory is that if you look at John chapter 6, so let's pull that up real fast. Okay, so in John chapter 6, Jesus repeatedly says, I will raise him up at the last day. I will raise him again, raise it up again at the last day. I will raise him up at the last day. So a lot of people ask the question, well, last day of what? What is he referring to? One thing to notice is that right at the beginning of this chapter, the setting is given. It says, and the Passover, a feast of the Jews, was nigh. So this is just before Passover. So could it be that Jesus is referring to the last day of Passover, or that this is the hint, right? We're supposed to search these things out based on the context. So that would be consistent with this idea that this other hint of this term of solemn assembly is all these hints are pointing to the last day of Passover. In other words, the seventh day of unleavened bread. Now, unfortunately, that date also passed. That was, since seventh day of unleavened bread on the scriptural calendar is Nisan 21, and on Enochian Nisan 21, that was May 11th. Yeah, unfortunately, that passed. So at this point, we think it's logical to apply all of those clues that we've been led to by the Holy Spirit to Second Passover. So that's why we're looking at Second Passover right now, but specifically the last day of Second Passover. Now let me quickly mention another reason that Second Passover is a standout day for us. Now, anyone who's watched this channel for a while knows that we focus mostly on clues from Acts chapters 27 and 28, and also the book of Haggai. Not only is much of our diagram constructed from the dates found in the book of Haggai, but it also describes Zerubbabel being taken by the Lord, which we understand to be a typological rapture reference. So the other day, Brother G44 pointed out to me that Haggai 2 also hints at second Passover in verse 13. So if you take a quick look at Haggai chapter 2. It says, okay, so then Haggai said, then said Haggai, if one that is unclean by a dead body touch any of these, shall it be unclean? And the priest answered, and it said, it shall be unclean. Now, so we're talking about being unclean by touching a dead body. Okay, so now compare that to Numbers 9:6, okay, which is right around the part where they're talking about this second Passover regulation. Let's see. I think it was Numbers 9. Oh, I'm in the wrong chapter. Numbers 9:6. And it says, and there were certain men who were defiled by the dead body of a man, that they could not keep the Passover on that day. And they came before Moses and before Aaron on that day. So this is one of the reasons why the second Passover exists at all, concerning having been defiled by a dead body. Okay, the other one is being on a journey. So that part of Haggai seems to be another hint, another pointer that's calling out second Passover. Okay. And the next thing is that the actual date of Second Passover, the scriptural date when it's supposed to be observed, is here in Numbers 9:11. The 14th day of the second month, at even they shall keep it. And in going back to Haggai, well, who's taken? Zerubbabel is taken. Okay, and as I always mention on this channel, the Hebrew gematria value for Zerubbabel is equal to 241. Well, what's that? Well, that's also 142 backwards, which is the numerical signature for the 14th day of the second month, which is when Scripture defines when Second Passover should be observed. So that's another hint pointing to Second Passover. Another thing is that if you take that place where that date, that scriptural date is defined, that's Numbers 9:11. Okay, so if you do 9:11, which is the signature of that chapter verse, and you add 142, which is 14th day of the second month, 911 plus 142, it equals 1053, which is basically, numerically speaking, is a 153. So that also is a hint that the 153 fish will be taken in connection with that date of Second Passover. So, as I said, I think that using the clues that we've been led to by the Holy Spirit so far, that we would be taken at the last day of Second Passover. In other words, on the seventh day of unleavened bread. Because if somebody is, first of all, one might ask, well, why would they also have these 7 days of unleavened bread after Second Passover? Well, I guess why wouldn't they, right? I mean, if you're trying to keep the law and you are keeping the Second Passover 1 month late, well, you would still have to complete all of the other, Torah observances in connection with Passover. The eating of, in other words, the eating of only unleavened bread for that 7 day period. Why wouldn't you? So now I also want to say it's certainly possible that, our Father takes us on plain old Second Passover, which is, according to the rabbinical calendar, May 23rd, May 22nd, going into the 23rd. So that's coming right up. And I and others have even found some very compelling clues to support that date. For one thing, the fact that the full moon is on May 23rd is extremely compelling to me. But I'm going to, consider the clues that the Holy Spirit has led us to up to now. And considering those clues, I believe that I'm being led not to the first day of rabbinical Second Passover, but rather to the last day of rabbinical Second Passover, which is May 28th and May 29th. And by the way, I'm saying rabbinical Second Passover to avoid confusion, just so you know that I'm not referring to Second Passover on the Enochian calendar, but rather the official Jewish one. Okay? All right, so that is, like I said, May 28th going into the 29th. Let me just quickly write that down here. So that's 528 and 529. Now that 529 number should look pretty familiar to watchers of this channel. Do you remember Strong's Greek 529? Let me pull that up real fast. So I've talked about this at length, this number. I think it was originally brought to my attention by Brother G44. But this particular Strong's number only has 3 occurrences in the Bible, and that is, first of all, it's in Acts 28:15. So at the end of their journey, when Paul finally meets the brethren south of Rome at the 3 taverns and the Appii Forum, that word meet is Strong's G529, apenthesis. Okay. Now, what made this Strong's word so interesting to us is the fact that it's used in only 2 other places in the New Testament in basically very, very well-known rapture verses. So first of all, it's used in Matthew 25:6, where it says, "Behold, the bridegroom cometh, go out to meet him." I'm sure we've all heard that before. That word "meet" there is Strong's G529. And then the other one is the very famous 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 17. Then we, which are alive and remain, shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. So that word "meet" there is also Strong's Greek 529. So obviously that word there, where that's used where Paul is meeting the brethren, has some very interesting company there. So yeah, and what's interesting is, so that's 529, sort of same signature as the date May 29th, 529. And what's interesting is that if you look at 528, Strong's Greek 528, it's apantao. That's also to meet. Okay, so it's not, so 527 is something completely different. And then 528 and 529 carry this meaning of meet. And then 530 is something completely different. So very conspicuously, right off the bat, 528 and 529 match Strong's Greek 528 and 529. All right. So another thing I want to point out is that if you go to, we're just looking at John chapter 6, but if you go to the chapter just before, John chapter 5, Jesus is talking about the resurrection, and he's talking about the graves being opened and the dead coming forth. And where does he say that? He says it in John 5:28 and John 5:29. So John 5:28 is, "Marvel not at this, for the hour is coming in which all that are in the graves shall hear his voice, and shall come forth, they that have done good unto the resurrection of life, and they that have done evil unto the resurrection of damnation." So that is John 5:28 and 5:29. The 5:30 and 5:27 are not having anything to do with the resurrection. So let's also add that to our clues. Okay. Let me unzoom a little bit here. Okay. The next thing is Noah. Okay, so let's take a look in the Torah where he's first mentioned in the Bible at all. Okay, and that is in Book of Genesis, chapter 5, and you guessed it, in 5:28 and 5:29. That is those are the first mentions of Noah. So it's talking about in 5:28, Lamech lived 182 years and begat a son. That son is, the first time Noah is actually referenced in the Bible. And he called his name Noah, saying, "This same shall comfort us concerning our work and the toil of our hands, because of the ground which the Lord hath cursed." Okay, so we have, that's another clue. Noah is another clue pointing to 5:28, 5:29. Let me quickly add that to the list. Okay. All right, and then coming back to 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. Okay, so we know these two verses, very famous verses here. So we're looking at verses 16 and 17. "For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. That's verse 16, and then verse 17, then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds. Okay, and we know that the number 888 is the gematria value of Jesus Christ in Greek. So now if you take these chapter verse signatures of those two verses, 14:16 minus 888, you get 528. And then the next one is 14:17, 1 Thessalonians 4:17 minus 888, you get 529. You got your May 28th there, and May 29th. The last day of Second Passover. And as a side note, the verse signatures without the, the 1 on the beginning, if you just take a 4:16 plus 4:17, you get 8:33, which is telegraphing Psalms 83:3, which is the only place in the entire Bible that uses the expression hidden ones in reference to those who have been raptured. So Psalms 83:3 is, they have taken crafty counsel against thy people and consulted against thy hidden ones. Just a little side note there concerning those numbers there. Okay, so that's what I wanted to show, that these sort of numerical things that are pointing to 528 and 529. Now, I want to show you the latest update to the big symmetrical diagram, which is the most exciting part of this video. And hopefully there are still people watching at this point. But there's going to be a reward for the people who are still watching, I guess I should say. Before I show you those changes, it's necessary that I first explained a little numerical mystery that Brother G44 and I have been intrigued by over the last few months. So there's this one numerical operation that tends to reveal secrets, and that is adding or subtracting a number to or from its reverse. Now, I've shown a couple of examples of that already in this video. So I think I showed you the date of the 276 sign. If you take the 1227, which is 12/27, December 27th, and then you subtract its reverse, 7221, you get the year Anno Fall, or Anno Mundi as some people like to call it, but on my timeline it's Anno Fall, because Anno Mundi is 7 years prior to that. You get 594, which is the 5994, which is the date Anno Fall that the sign actually manifested in the sky, and which is also current, still the current year. So if you use this operation, in using this operation, I'll say, two of the most crucial numbers in our rapture research, 726, most of you, I'm sure, are aware of that number. That's, the Strong's number for harpazo in Greek. And then 924, which is the date signature for the famous date of the 24th day of the 9th month, Kislev 24, which is the date that is found in the book of Haggai that our diagram is based on. It's just a monument. These are just monumental numbers. Okay, so if you add these numbers to their reverse, so 726 plus 627 is equal to 1353. Same thing with 924. If you add that to 429, it's equal to 1353. The thing that intrigued us is that there are actually only 3 numbers that, when added to the reverse, add up to the number 1353. So it's 726, 924, and drumroll 528. So we have been wondering what is the deal with this number for a while, because it seems to stand in the company of these biblically huge numbers, but we didn't understand what its significance was. So of course you're probably thinking, well, you see what I'm getting at here, because 528 telegraphs the date of 528. But it actually gets better. So now I'm going to finally go to the diagram. Now this is the diagram that I showed earlier, and as you can see, this is the last iteration of it. You've got these day spans at the top. At this point, when in this last iteration, the longest day span is 228 days, which was the 114 days times 2, which, by the way, is another thing that we thought might be a hint at Second Passover, because if you think about it, since this diagram is symmetrical, and remember, we were thinking it was Passover because you have this 114 days from the left extent of this diagram to the midpoint, and then another 114 days to 114. If you think about it, I mean, I don't know, it seems like there's also another thing you can look at, another way you can look at this is that you've got, since 114 numerically represents Passover, it kind of has both Passovers here in a way. It's like you've got two Passovers. So the first, this left 114 day span is one Passover, and the right one is another Passover. Is that like a sort of like way of hinting at the second Passover? I don't know. It's just something that occurred to me just now. But anyway, so this was the diagram, the last iteration shown in the last video. And so the exciting new update for this video is here. Okay. Now, remember that the last iteration of this diagram began on September 19th, which was the date of the child asteroid Revelation 12 sign, and ended on Enochian Passover. Okay, so which was May 4th, and that was a day span of 228 days. So what I did was I projected forward from Enochian Passover another 24 days, and that lands on the last day of Second Passover on the rabbinical calendar. And now, since this is a symmetrical diagram, I had to likewise project backwards from the beginning of the last iteration, date, which was September 19th. I had to project backward from that date 24 days. And what I found was interesting. So that takes you to, let me just zoom in a little bit here. That takes you to August 25 to 26, okay, which is the 127th and 128th Enochian day of the year, which numerically telegraphs the date signatures of the 276 sign, which is 1227 and 1228. And actually, it's doubly confirmed on this particular date here, because on those two dates, the August 26th and the August 25th, there were respectively 127 and 128 days remaining in the Gregorian calendar year. So that's pretty cool. And here's the amazing thing. Let me zoom in here just so you can see this side here. Okay, there's the last day of Second Passover on the rabbinical calendar. So 25 days projected forward, and then 25 days projected backwards. Okay. Now the amazing thing here is that this entire diagram now has a day span of 276 days. So that blew my mind. That is obviously projecting the 276 sign itself. And I believe that this is what the author of this diagram has been waiting to reveal all along. So, you've got a 276 day span starting from a date that has a numeric signature of the 276 sign dates and ending on May 28th to 29th, the last day of Second Passover, which, by the way, just so happens to be the 39th Enochian day of the year. And remember, 39 is telegraphing the 3rd and 9th constellations, Gemini and Sagittarius, where the moon and sun were positioned in the 276 sign. And remember that numerical mystery regarding 825 plus its reverse, 528, equaling 1353? Well, that also happens to manifest here in this diagram. Seeing as the diagram begins on the 128th Enochian day, which starts on 825, August 25th, and ends on the 39th Enochian day of the year, which starts on 528, which is May 28th. So you've got your diagram. You've got the diagram starting on 825 and ending on 528, which also solves that mystery for us regarding those numbers and why the number 528 is in the company of 726 and 924, the other big rapture numbers in our numerics research. So this is just amazing. I mean, this really, to me, this just ties everything together. I think this is what the author of this diagram, in my opinion, our Father in heaven, it was trying to was trying to develop all along, how this is all connected to the 276 sign. And so, as I mentioned, this starts with the 128th Enochian day of the year, because the 128th Enochian day of the year is properly August 25th to the 26th, sunset to sunset, and the last date here is May 28th going to the 29th, which is the 39th Enochian day of the year. So you have the 128 and the 39. And if you add 128 to 39, that adds up to 167, which is the number of verses in the book of Esther. So on top of everything else, this diagram is telegraphing Esther. Obviously very, very relevant in the rapture typology. And another amazing thing I noticed is that if you add up all of these day spans, okay, it reveals an interesting number. So I'm talking about these numbers up here. So it starts with this day span that, pivoting around this Kislev 24 midpoint. The first day span is from the 276 sign to the completion of the dedication of the temple, of the living temple. That's a 30-day span. And the spans increase as you go up. So we've got 30, 52, 74, and so on, all the way up to 276. So if you add those all together, what do you get? You get 1416, which is giving us, as a reminder, 1 Thessalonians 4:16, for the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Mind blown. Totally blown. And if that wasn't enough, if you look at that date, let's see here. From that midpoint date of January 11th, 2024 to 5/28/2024 happens to be 4 months and 17 days, reflecting 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 17, where we meet the Lord in the clouds and shall be forever with the Lord. Another thing about the number 528 is that those of you who follow my numerics work know that another technique that God uses to hide information is what I call number incrementing or number decrementing. And what I mean by that is just imagine one of those old school alarm clock radios that has the numbers that flip. So if you just flip all the numbers down of a given number, you get a different number. Or if you flip it up, you get a different number. So if you do that technique to the number 528 of May 28th, mathematically, that's simply you subtract 111, you get 417. Once again, that's 1 Thessalonians 4:17, which was up here. I'll just throw it down there with the verse 16. So yeah, the fact that and on top of all this, the fact that Strong's Greek 529 meet is found in one of the 3 verses that it's found in is this word right here in 1 Thessalonians 4:17, meet, right here. I'm just blown away at the connections here that show the significance of these numbers 528 and 529, and how they're so deeply connected to not only 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, 16 and 17, but all this other stuff. And I'm just my mind is totally blown. Mainly, probably the most amazing thing to me is the fact that this seems to have all come together now with this day span equaling 276 days, which is so meaningful to me in the obvious connection to the 276 sign. And remember how I said that the number 139 symbolizes the 276 sign? Because, again, the sign involved the 1st, 3rd, and 9th constellations. Well, another thing I noticed was that, let's see here, if you use the, let me just type. So if instead of the 826 and the 528 dates from which we are constructing the 238 day spans to get the 276, if you use the early and late Gregorian dates of the corresponding Enochian day, because remember, a Jewish day is going to straddle 2 Gregorian days, so you can either use the when you're calculating the day spans, you can use one or the other, right? Because the day spans are based on the Gregorian day. But since the Enochian day straddles those 2 Gregorian days, you can use the early or the late ones. So instead of using the 826 and the 528, which is the later and the earlier, if you use the earlier and the later, well then instead of the 138 days, you get the 139 days. So there's 139 days from August 25th to Kislev 24 date of January 11th, and then from that date to 529 is another 139 days. So in that way, this number 139, which is deeply connected to that sign, is also manifesting in this calendar alignment. And remember, we found in previous videos that the 276 sign was the start of a defined tarrying period. Not only because of Habakkuk 2:3, which is talking about he will come and will not tarry, and remember 2:3 pointing to 2023, but also since we found that if you add up the verse numbers of every instance in the Gospels in which Jesus tarries, they sum to 139. So I actually had to go search for every place in the 4 Gospels where Jesus is tarrying. And it was these verses here, right? Matthew 25:5, Luke 2:43, Luke 24:29, John 3:22, and John 4:40. Now, if you add up all those verse numbers, so that the 5 plus 43 plus 29 plus 22 plus 40 add up to 139. So that shows the connection. And there are other ways I connect the 139 or the 276 sign in general to the concept of tarrying scripturally. But this is just a major one here that to me is a very strongly suggestive that 276 sign was the point from which the defined tarrying period begins. Okay, and another thing which is pretty amazing that I found is that if you take the United States date signature and the international date signature of May 28th and you sum them, so let's take the way it's written in the United States is like that, and as far as I know, the rest of the world is written like that. 528 plus 285 is equal to 813, telegraphing Psalms 81:3, which is amazing because remember that was the verse that mentions the solemn feast day. So it says, blow up the trumpet in the new moon in the time appointed on our solemn feast day. So that means that the date of this rabbinical 7th day of unleavened bread on which there is a solemn assembly, right, so it's a solemn feast day, is numerically pointing to the verse that mentions a solemn assembly. Isn't that something? Okay, so let me quickly point out some interesting date durations that I found. So amazingly, 153 days, exactly 153 days after December 27th and 28th, the dates of the 276 sign just happens to be, you guessed it, 528 and 529. And as we've already mentioned, 528 and 529 is the 39th Enochian day of the year, further confirming the association to the 276 sign, in which the moon and the sun were in the 3rd and 9th constellations, with Jupiter and Aries the Lamb, symbolizing the Lamb on the cross from the 3rd to the 9th hour. On May 28th, there are exactly 217 days left in the Gregorian year, which is the date signature of the flood start date given in Genesis 7:11. So, as in the days of Noah. Okay, so the next thing I found is that 528 is exactly 227 days after the October 14th wedding ring eclipse. Now, the eclipse that happened on October 14th was what's called an annular eclipse. So it's not like a total solar eclipse. It's what happens when the moon is a little bit further away from the Earth, so that from our perspective it doesn't completely cover the sun, that there's a big thick circle around it. So it gives it the appearance of a wedding ring. That's what we're calling it, the wedding ring eclipse. But essentially all that is it's a circle in the sky. So, and 227 is the well-known pi approximation ratio, which is of 22 divided by 7, right? So it's like 22 divided by 7 equals pi approximately, is about as good as you could get it back then when the ancients discovered that. And so that's rather well known. So this pi approximation, and pi of course has to do with circles. So pi approximation ratio days after the circle appears in the sky, you have 528, which is very interesting. Now that pi approximation ratio was discovered by a man named, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but Archimedes, I think. And Archimedes happened to be born in Syracuse, as was pointed out to me by Brother G44. And Syracuse, if you recall, was the place where Paul tarries for 3 days after they leave the island of Malta. So in Acts chapter 28, for 3 days, they're in Syracuse. And God even put a funny inside joke there, because if you look at, because keep in mind, Syracuse is where Archimedes is from, and he's the one who first discovered this pi approximation ratio, pi having to do with circles. And it says in Acts 28, verse 12, "And landing at Syracuse, we tarried there 3 days, and from thence we fetched a compass, and came to Rhegium." So he's saying, we fetched a compass from Syracuse, right? And what does a compass have to do? What do you do with a compass other than draw a circle? And what is Syracuse known for? Well, it's the birthplace of Archimedes, who came up with this, who discovered the pi approximation ratio, pi having to do with circles. So it just goes to show that our Lord has a great sense of humor. And yeah, while we're at it, let's take a look at also let's add a circle to 528, which is representing May 28th. And a circle being, of course, 360 degrees. So 528 plus 360 degrees is equal to 888, which, as you should know by now, is Jesus Christ in Greek. Isn't that awesome? Okay, so from here I want to just end with a little simple math. So thanks to our brother over at the New Jerusalem channel, who taught me to find secrets hidden by natural logarithm, I found some cool stuff. And if you don't know what natural logarithm is, just look on your calculator. There should be a button labeled LN. That's for computing the natural logarithm of any number. Now, like if you look on this calendar right here, you've got the LN right here. That's natural log. Okay, so if you take if you do natural log of 529 representing May 29th, Well, let's just do it right here. 529. You get 6.27, which is 726 reversed. Harpazo 726. 288 is also a very interesting number because that is the number of days in a typical pregnancy, which, and you know, we are going to be the nation being birthed in a day. So 288 always pops up in rapture related numerics. Now if you take that 288 and add to it 241, which is the gematria value of Zerubbabel in Hebrew, you get 529, May 29th. And if you take 529 and add to it 994, which is a shorthand version of the current year 5994, Anno Fall, you get 1523. What is 1523? Well, that's the 241st prime number. 241, of course, referring to Zerubbabel, or you could be looking at it as 142 reversed, 14th day of the second month, symbolizing the date of Second Passover. And for the last one, if you take, so what happens at the rapture, right? Or at the beginning of the Great Tribulation, you've got the rapture, and then you've got the events of Revelation unfolding. So you've got 125, which represents Revelation 12:5. Man-child being caught up. And then you've got 404, which is the number of verses in the book of Revelation. If you add those together, you get 529. May 29th. Hopefully. Potentially. Alright, well that's about all I've got for you guys today. I personally am totally excited about these latest revelations, just mainly how the 276 sign is now clearly manifesting itself in the diagram in such obvious ways. And I'm also pleased with the fact that, you know, this looking at the last day of Second Passover, we're integrating the clues from past watch days, high watch days that we've had. Instead of just abandoning everything, it shows that we're, you know, God is leading us on a process of discovery to reveal, you know, the final date through all these accumulated clues. So yeah, I hope you guys are excited. I just want to say though, just to remind you guys, this is just a guess. Only our Father in heaven knows when the rapture will occur. These latest revelations could merely be another stepping stone on the path to the final answer. That's been our experience so far. So who knows? But we remain hopeful, and we keep watching faithfully, and we keep looking up. Now, all of these charts and diagrams are found in the shared folder, which I always link, and I'll link again in the description of the video. So I want to thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you have some great information, just drop me a comment. And thanks again for watching. God bless.